Talking about natural gas is a source of energy, a source of petrochemistry, and source of fertilizers. Natural gas, it's already stored for millions of years. So if compared to renewable energy, so it's polluting less, like 50 to 60% compared to coal. So I think natural gas still has a crucial role to play in the global outlook of energy, I think, by 2050. Talking about the outlook and of 2050, and we start with the part two of this podcast. So, talking about the plans to meet zero carbon emissions by 2050, we remember the intense winter storm which hit Texas in February 2021, and
Yes.
Wind turbines have been stalled due to the freezing temperatures. So zero electricity generated, and same for solar energy. So do you think that natural gas with renewables can bridge the gap, and let's say bridge the gap with oil and also coal in the upcoming decades?
Yes, the answer is, the short answer is
can bridge the gap without oil and coal.
So I will say yes, but not within the timeline allotted. So the challenge is, and part of the thing whenever we've had this discussion, because we have people across the energy industry, the investment community, the renewable side that we have communication with, and all those communications, what we discuss is it's not one or the other, it's what percentage of both. In other words, right now we just talked about coal and natural gas as two variables. Well, and it's not one or either, but I just presented a constraint or a challenge that forces us in a direction of, well, we need a little bit of coal unless we're willing to have blackouts.
Some rich countries, I believe, can have this access to energy. They have already access to energy, and they have the means to make that transition,
Yes.
to smooth that smooth transition. But for the poor countries, developing countries, I think they have. Just give you an example. For example, Uganda just discovered oil and just started to develop its oil. So, and I think European Union start to say, "Hey, stop! Oil is emitting too much carbon." I say, why we criticize Uganda? You spent like 1 century and you are exploring and exploit oil and gas and coal, and you developed your industry. So why, when it comes to the poor countries, I would say, okay, we have a plan by 2050, we have to stop all carbon emissions. So I think it's unfair. We have to give chance also to developing countries. Let's give them another century to get developed, and let's say the time they get that technology, that development, I think we can really judge them. We say, okay, tomorrow, let's say we give them schedule and to lessen their carbon emissions. Talking about, thank you very much, Brian, for your clarifications. And talking about, if we look at 2050 projection, let's say in 2050 projection related to a natural carbon, based on the technologies available now, with limited storage of power generated from renewables, which still really weak in large scale capacities. Time we still record high global demand in natural gas and fossils in general. So another issue is rising up: battery energy storage systems, BESS. How can we balance between the investment in renewables and the storage capacity? Time we are getting all the electricity from renewables. Do we have enough money and minerals to reach these targets, as the price of lithium carbonates soared by 10 times in the last 10 years?
That is a great question, and actually at the crux of the argument, because you mentioned something that many people overlook. One reason renewables is in the conversation in the United States, and I'm going to use the United States as an example of this. One reason is because of subsidies. There is subsidies that is provided by government to make it a little bit more economic. And those subsidies basically change the economics. But if you look at the face of it, coal is a better economic choice for power right now.
Yeah, for sure. It's very cheap. It's very cheap. It's the case. It's used also in Poland. I think in Poland, electricity generation in Poland is like 80% from coal. So it's very cheap. So
so there is a balance to, and this gets back to the conversation that you had about the new development of an emerging economy that, hey, we just got here. We just found this, as we just arrived. And I do think there should not be an unfair equaling. How we do that, I don't know. But what I'd say is more mature economies, more mature countries that have a little bit more resources should lead the way on the investment. And that's what seems to be happening, but not punitively punish those that are trying to create those resources, because you have many parts of the world that may globally get called out for, well, you're not being environmentally friendly because you are burning coal for electricity. Well, their choice is to burn coal or not have electricity. The other fact is many of the advanced economies have offshored a lot of manufacturing and industrial to other countries, which basically changes the emissions from a local source to an international source. And then, so there's a little bit of that bias, but realistically speaking, for the environment, for emissions, we should do as much as possible on the renewables, but we should also balance that with an economic weighing. That's a factor. Now, what percentage of the logic that takes a lot of time and energy to sort through, but there needs to be a balancing act on, well, what is the economic impact? What is the carbon impact? And what is the equalization between countries that can afford the option, that can afford the option of coal and natural gas? I mean,